Good evening. As you may have heard, there have recently been proposals to cut the NASA budget for the 2026 fiscal year by $6 billion. It's quite a bit. That would severely damage NASA's ability to fund the new lunar program, to operate the telescopes currently running, and to build the new telescopes, as well as take away a lot of funding for American industry and education. This would be detrimental to national interests and investments that have been made over the past multiple decades. So to protect these interests and investments, the budget cannot go through. The most immediate and obvious of these impacts would be the damage to the Artemis program and the potential of the Artemis program, primarily one of which being the field of nuclear energy. For starters, the Artemis program and its affiliate programs, especially the Space Launch System, the Orion capsule, and the Gateway program, have all represent billions of dollars in investments from taxpayers and decades of work to expand humanity beyond the moon. And according to the proposed budget, the SLS and Orion would both be cut after Artemis 3. So one trip to the moon and they're gone. And the Gateway program is just going to be scrapped entirely. So these investments that have been in the works to promote space are just going to go by the wayside because there's not money for them anymore. And the Lunar Gateway being an international program also would damage international stellar interests. So that would be fun. Lunar investments have been made to returning to the moon because one of the main reasons for that being the natural resources there that really just aren't available on Earth. One of which being incredibly high amounts of helium-3, a proposed fuel for nuclear fusion that will produce magnitudes more energy than any power plant currently on Earth and have basically zero pollutants of any kind. Nuclear energy, as it is now, is still by and large the most effective source of power production and the safest energy production, you compare it to fossil fuels, which killed almost 9 million people in 2018 alone, according to Earth.org. And according to a NASA 2021 report, there's enough helium-3 on the moon to completely power everything in the United States for decades, if not centuries. And if the Artemis program is damaged, then lunar travel is going to be damaged, which means anything that could come from lunar travel, such as lunar mining that would lead to nuclear power, will also be damaged. However, more than just the Artemis program are going to be damaged by the cuts, especially when it comes to telescopes and observatories, both existing and in construction. According to astronomy.com, 40 programs are going to be defunded, and at least 19 of those are just going to be canned, just fully disposed of. And some of these programs that are just going to be axed are the Chandra X-ray Observatory, which has been orbiting the Earth gathering X-ray data since 1999 and still shows that it can keep going. We're just going to get rid of it. And another one is the Juno program, which has been orbiting Jupiter, collecting data on the gas giants since 2016. However, as I said before, projects yet to come are also going to be damaged, such as the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, which is currently being developed, and according to space.com, will receive half of the funding it needs in the 2026 fiscal year, according to the budget. And programs that have already been constructed but just haven't been activated yet, such as the Europa Clipper, which hasn't been activated because it's still flying through space, it hasn't gotten to Europa yet, will also be defunded. Just never given a chance to really do anything. However, some of the damage from these cuts will be a lot more down to earth, per se, because NASA invests enormous amounts into American industry and American education. According to NASA themselves, over 2,700 suppliers across 47 states provided resources of some kind to the Artemis program. As I said before, the Artemis program is going to be shut down, which means these suppliers are going to be severely economically damaged. And the local economies upheld by these local aerospace businesses will also be damaged. And as I said, NASA works with companies from all across the country, so these damages won't just be in Florida or Texas or in California. It's going to be everywhere, because companies that receive funding from NASA and thus fund their communities are everywhere in the country. But not only will industry be hurt, education will be hurt, because NASA has an entire division called the Office of STEM Engagement, which is entirely dedicated to funding K-12 programs and college programs to get students interested in STEM courses and keep them on track to become the next generation of scientists and engineers. According to a columnist in the Seattle Times, who has a long history in the Washington aerospace industry, the University of Washington receives over $100 million on average every year because of the NASA funding for institutions. And almost all of this STEM outreach and university funding will be cut with the 2026 budget cuts. The University of Washington gets almost all of their funding from the Earth Science Division of NASA, which will receive a 52% cut to its funding, according to the 2026 plan. And as I said before, NASA funds an enormous amount of industry, and in Washington state alone, this funding provides $1 billion to the state's economy every year, which is all just going to disappear because the majority of the programs and investments that upholds the Washington aerospace industry will be cut. And 5,500 jobs under NASA are going to be cut. So the NASA workforce itself, not just a contractor or some subsidiary that indirectly benefits from NASA, NASA itself is going to have to downsize by what is, according to the Planetary Society, the one largest workforce cut in NASA's history, and will bring the NASA workforce down to the level it was in 1960. So NASA is going to have a much more difficult time funding the programs that it has left and operating all of the equipment and all of the internal management that is needed to keep the space program going. It's all just going to be lost because of a lack of budget. The new American space program will be severely damaged by these budget cuts in pretty much every field of American industry and education, be it the industry and education, as I said, or energy, defense, just science in general, the ability to discover and expand in our solar system and beyond. It's all upheld by NASA in some way, and with the budget cuts, the ability to operate all these programs will also disappear. Of course, as I've been saying, that this is a budget proposal. It has not been approved yet. It's still going through Congress right now, which means Congress can be convinced to pull the plug on it and keep the budget as it has been during the 24 and 25 fiscal years. To making a stand against these budget cuts will support the American space program, which will support every aspect of the country. And so I'm asking you all to convince Congress and take any power you have to keep NASA funded. Thank you very much.